Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It is time for another Astro Chat. I know it's been a while, so good to see you all. And we're going to be gathering today to talk about the upcoming full moon in Gemini. So today it's myself, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna, aka Modern Yaga. Unfortunately, Anne Sundell could not be with us today. We hope to have her back in 2 weeks when we gather again. We are doing the full moon in Gemini, as I mentioned, and the data for that is November 27th. If you are here in the States, the central time zone, that's going to be at 3:16 a.m. Across the pond in the UK, 9:16 a.m., if I did my math right. And in Finland, that would be 11:16 a.m. We're looking at the full moon that's going to be at 4 degrees of Gemini. And we're looking at what's going to go on between November 27th and December 12th, which is when we will have our next new moon and be back with you all again. Before we kind of jump in and start unpacking, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel. It really helps us out. And if we can get enough people subscribing, then hopefully next year we can start to do some lives. And that is our goal. So we need your help and support with that. If you've already subscribed, don't forget to like and hit that bell button on your phone or on your computer. That will notify you when we're back, because we do on average come out once every 2 weeks with each new and full moon. So that's all of the housekeeping. I think I got all that down. So before we look at the chart, I think, Monica, you were going to kick us off with talking about the Sabian symbol.
I will, and I will also say that as and when we start doing live, it will actually transpire how many edits we have. So that might be interesting. So Sabian symbol for this Libra. I keep saying Libra for some reason. For this Gemini full moon, is a radical magazine or publication asking for action, displays a sensational front page, which I'm thinking it's absolutely perfect, not just for the full moon in Gemini, which highlights, pun intended, a Gemini communication thing, but also it really speaks to the situation in the world at the moment. And magazines, publications, news being full of sensational front pages for so many reasons.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we hit the record button. And one of the things that stood out for both of us was this idea of information versus misinformation and how that is so key right now. It's becoming more and more apparent and important, especially as things are happening in different countries around the world, as tensions are heightening. There's just this buzz happening, and it's easy to fall in and only talk to people or only rely on sources, as Monica, you were sharing with me earlier, that kind of create an echo chamber. I really liked that point, that we have to be aware of only seeing our point of view, that it's important to see that point of view and to express and to call for some, radical change and to put it out there and speak our truth. And also, I think it's important, the other side of Gemini is to also listen to people who may have differing views or be on the other side of an argument or a debate. And remember that our perspective is just that. It's our perspective.
Yeah. No, I mean, we're going into now conversation around Gemini and the full moon, aren't we? Which links so beautifully to that Sabian symbol. But like you said, we forget that actually Gemini do need to listen. There's this stereotype of Gemini who only talk, 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 talk. The kind of gossipy type of a client or a person or a colleague. But actually, Gemini is about gathering information. It's about talking to other people, to connect with other people, to connect with other sources so you can gather information. It's not talking for the sake of talking, it's talking for the sake of expanding your horizons, of linking and networking, and connecting. And you can't do that if you're only talking for your own perspective, because no one will want to connect with you. I mean, if you're going, well, about me, what can I tell? Like, who's going to stick around, right? So I think we do sometimes go too much into that Gemini stereotype and think about like, oh, they just full of news. They are, but they also this kind of social butterfly who will take a message from you and pass it on. And I think one that can be just a very simple kind of gossip. Oh my God, have you seen what she wore on that show, at that party, whatever. But also it's that kind of sharing of information. I'll pick it up from this person and I'll share it with another. And the idea is creating those networks, creating those connection so that information can travel. And if that information is true, good kind of, that is how we learn also other people's point of view. Oh, I didn't know that my neighbors are thinking of that or planning that, or doing this. Now I know I can respond to that. Oh, I didn't know my colleagues at work, were planning to do something. Again, now I can respond to that. So it's having the information to be able to act. And I think, again, just going back to that Sabian symbol about displaying sensational front page. There is a lot, and I mean, we could just probably talk for hours just on the topic of how to communicate. How do you communicate? There's so much sensationalism in the news today that, I don't know if we can actually call it news anymore, because the idea is that you're just creating a sensational headline just to get the clicks, just to get the data, just to get the money, right? So the news, the delivery of news, that kind of pure journalism really has transformed over the last, few years with the rise of social media, with the rise of different delivery and so on. So how do we communicate, both in the big publishing spaces with news, with publications, but also personally? Are we just going for headlines? Are we just going, oh, have you heard so and so did this headline? Or are we actually going deep into information? Have you heard this so and so did this, but this is behind it, and this is behind it, and this is how we can help, and this is actually what we can learn from that, and actually this is where we should stand by that person? Where is that level of communication that we're doing? To what degree we're actually engaging with information? Are we just scanning for the headlines? Again, over the last few years, I think we've been taught that our attention span just
Mhm.
got smaller.
Yeah.
My husband shared that he's part of the content production, or was actually part of content production, and whenever they got the workshops around that, most recent years, they basically did a research that the people's attention on the website went from like few seconds in like double digits to literally single digits. People
Yes.
want information quick. They want it delivered quick. They're not waiting for the website to be loaded. They're not reading through the article. They just go by, headline and a few keywords.
Yeah.
So again, at that full moon, I think that is highlighted. If we're going by that, like you said, Kimberly, are we going with misinformation, disinformation, or are we going for the information? We're going deeper. We're trying to understand.
Yeah. And I think this Sabian symbol, these concepts about information, about the quality, about listening, I think it permeates pretty much everything we're going to be looking at as we unpack this chart.
God, yeah.
Um, I'd like to talk a bit about the moon in Gemini, but before we go there, let's just kind of do an overview for folks of what's happening during this 2-week window because we're not going to be able to talk about everything. But some of these, as y'all know, some of these could be important for you. So if these places, if these things are significant in your chart, be sure and look them up, pay attention, follow it. Specifically, Mercury will be entering Capricorn, I believe on the 1st of December. And then it goes retrograde on the 13th. And we'll talk about that in our next podcast, which is about the next lunation on the 12th. But just know that during these 2 weeks, we're going to be in pre shadow. And I'm sure you've heard us talk about pre shadow a lot. So we're not going to go into that again. But yes, we're there. We're in the pre shadow of the final Mercury retrograde of the year in Capricorn. We also are going to have Venus change signs. She'll be going into Scorpio on the 4th. And Neptune is direct on December 6th. Yay! I'm very excited as planets are becoming more and more out of those retrograde and into direct, and things are moving. We've had so many retrograde for so long. And also going back to that Venus, Monica, you mentioned earlier to me, Venus will be conjunct the nodal axis. It's going to conjunct the south node at 24 degrees of Libra, and that will be on, I think you said November 24th. And
29th.
oh, thank you, 29th. So the end of the month on the 29th. And then for those who work with asteroids or minor planets, if you're familiar with Eris, Eris is hanging out on the north node. So as Pluto has moved away, and y'all have heard us talk so much about Pluto squaring the nodes for I was going to say months, but probably years. So as Pluto is kind of pulling away, or the nodes are pulling away, and that's widening and separating, now we're seeing that it's going to be Eris and Venus that are going to be significant with the nodes and what needs to change there. If y'all are interested in hearing more about either nodal axis things or Eris, put it in the comments, and we'll know in the future to like make that a thing that we spotlight. But for today, we're going to talk about the moon in Gemini, specifically a new moon. If you listen to some of our past episodes, we've talked about the new moon in Gemini and the full moon. Oh gosh, I got tongue-tied. That's right. Sorry. Sorry. Full moon in Gemini. And we've talked in past episodes about the new moon and the full moon. That's what I was trying to say. So they're kind of different. They're similar but different. Gemini is an air sign. And for me, whenever the moon, which the moon, basically speaking, represents things like our unconscious, our emotions, our physical body, our connection to nurturance and the people who've nurtured us. These are not very logical, rational concepts. They're deep, they're embedded, they're constructs rather than an actual thing that you can point at and name. I mean, how do you define nurturance? That varies. There's a lot of thinking and assessing involved in what it means for me or what it means for you. I find when the moon is in any of the three air signs, it's real easy to want to think about my feelings, to think about, plan for my body, rather than to be in my body, rather than to feel my feelings. Not too long ago, I was having a conversation with a friend who's also a therapist who kept catching me up because I kept saying, well, I feel that people need to do. She goes, is that a feeling? I think that's a thought, and those kind of things about how we honestly, in society, in Western society, are pretty much taught or encouraged not to dwell too much on our feelings or what's going on, push it aside. If you're sick, power through if there's an unpleasant thing. So with Gemini moons, what I find can really happen is we're in our mind rather than in those things, but we're jumping around. So we might be in our feelings for a few minutes and then we're in a thought. And it's that sort of squirrel kind of energy, which I always associate the squirrel animal with Gemini. I see this and that's a shiny object and I want to explore and I want to think. And now I see this. And so we may have a moment of being in our feeling, being in our body, but it's hard to hold on to. It's hard to stay there. Now, with the full moon specifically, I think that this can be where we start to have illumination about maybe what have I been thinking. This is a fabulous time to really get in touch with oh, I've had that pain in my shoulder. I wonder what my body wants to say to me and have conversation with, yourself about your body, or to sit down with somebody else and be like, I'm just really, every time you mention we should go to the movies, I've got this, maybe this is a good time to clear the air, to get it outside, not to have everything festering inside, but to externalize, to get it out, to converse. It's also, Gemini is such a social sign that when the moon is in Gemini, it is a great time to meet up with friends, do the one-on-one chit chat, conversation over coffee. This isn't necessarily a sign that is invested in practicality. So this might be a really good time to step back, to brainstorm, to, like I said, use friends as sounding boards, to let your mind have space to wander, and knowing that that wandering of thought is going to be tied up with conversation. It's also a fabulous time to really think about where we need to listen. Am I needing to listen to, thinking of the moon? Do I need to listen to those who nurture, those who need nurturance? Do I need to listen to my body? What is it that I need to listen to? And what is it I need to express? And I have to say, I love the sign of Gemini. It is one of those signs. I love all 12 signs, but some are much more comfortable, right, for each of us than others. Gemini is one of those signs I'm very comfortable with its energy. I kind of like it. I love to run around with it, and I like it when my inner Gemini takes me into that ping pong, into, I don't know how many remember, but there used to be an Atari video game back in the day called, I think it was called Pong, and you'd move your little cursors, and literally there was a dot, and you were playing this like ping pong, and that's what I think of with Gemini, only much faster, where it's dot 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 dot. There's a lot of excitement and knowledge and energy that comes from that. It is also, like I mentioned, sometimes difficult to sit with things. So maybe giving ourselves space can be a wise thing. What about you, Monica? What is your focus when you're dealing with the full moon in Gemini?
Well, first of all, I was actually smiling when you were mentioning that pain in the shoulder and the knee. And I was like, why are you looking at me? So I think I might have to have a conversation with my shoulder. So thank you for that. That will be, my tip takeaway from this episode. Um, but when I think, I mean, I agree with, with everything that you say. What I would add to that is that Gemini, again, is that sign of polarity. There's two twins there, the heavenly twin and the earthly twin. And the idea that, there is their spiritual part of us and the earthly part of us. We need to eat and we need to be clothed, but also we need a meaning in life and, spiritual fulfillment. We need both. It's not either or. We basically need both. And I think when I think about Gemini, again, that kind of communicating and relating, it's also to kind of find um, that understanding of the other, that understanding of the polarity. It's not day or night, it's both. It's not earthly or spiritual, it's both. It's not, day or night. Again, like it's it's not about looking at one versus the other. It's more of a, how are those actually interconnecting? And I think, again, Gemini is the sign that is opposing Sagittarius. In Gemini, we're collecting that information, and in Sagittarius, we're seeing the big picture. When I think about Gemini and Sagittarius, sometimes I feel about a puzzle piece. Gemini is the one that makes sure that all the puzzle pieces are there. If we have the kind of picture of a puzzle pieces and we have 500 puzzles, Gemini will, make sure that there's like 489, and then we'll go, Kimberly, do you have another two pieces? Okay, I'll pick them up. And Monica, do you have another three pieces? I pick them up. And then I count them again. Okay, I have 500 pieces. And then Sagittarius comes in, and Sagittarius sees the big picture. I gather all that data. I can now fit that data together, which is what Gemini did. But Gemini is too close to that. So Gemini
Mm.
sees, the every puzzle piece, every kind of line between them, again, either or, do they fit, do they not fit, where do they fit together? But Gemini is so close to that, to make sure they fit together, that it doesn't have that space to step back and say, this is a beautiful picture of a waterfall, or this is a beautiful picture of an Oxford Street in London, or something else. And that's where Sagittarius comes in, and they both need that. Sagittarius cannot see a big picture without Gemini making connections, talking to people, relating, connecting, creating networks. Sagittarius can't do that, can't see the future, can't see that vision, can't see that through that mountain without having those connections. Sagittarius is not going to go on that adventure on its own. It needs to kind of see that. But then Gemini role is to connect, to create those pieces, to put them together. And at the full moon in Gemini, I feel like we are being asked about, how do we communicate and how do we relate? What is it? How do we use language? Again,
Mm.
Gemini is ruled by Mercury. How do we use language? Whether it's literal communication, whether it's, written, whether it's, through the news and social media. How do we use our power of speaking, our power of relating to others through that? The way we communicate the messages that are important to us, the messages previous archetype to Gemini is Taurus, which represents our values. How do we communicate what's important to us? What our values are? Are we free to communicate? Again, what's important to us, are we not? There are people and circumstances where you can't express yourself, you can't communicate. You're finding those networks, through very kind of secretive means, because you might not be able to be openly who you are.
Mm.
Again, there are still places in the world and situations where you can't quite open up about that. And again, we need to be aware of that and mindful. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that sometimes your security and health and well-being takes priority. And sometimes it's like, do I have the courage to speak up? If I'm in a corporate environment and I can see, something happening, do I have a courage and privilege to step up and say something, that maybe my colleague is being mistreated or harassed or bullied or something else? Do I have a courage and privilege to actually be able to speak about wider issues that happening in my country or happening in the world that I see? Do I have a platform when I communicate with my followers, my audience, whether I'm an artist, singer songwriter, or I don't know, I'm crocheting something and I have 80,000 followers on Instagram because I crochet beautiful things or create beautiful ceramics? Do I use that platform to communicate what's important to me as well? And how do I relate to that? And again, at the full moon, again, what I love about full moon, and if you've been watching us for a while, you probably heard me saying that at every full moon highlights our shadow. There's nowhere to hide. The light is there, the light from the luminaries, it's in opposition. So the sun and moon is in opposition. There is no place for shadows. So we can see clearly what triggers us, what's that
Yeah.
twin that we're not quite incorporated into us, ingested into us. So what is it that is around, again, communicating, relating, creating networks, that you're afraid of, that you're uncomfortable with, that scares you, that maybe triggers you?
Yeah.
Maybe it's someone else communicate things that you don't agree with, and instead of going into that me versus others, my message versus other message, maybe it's the time to kind of step back and say, what is the point of both messages? What are we trying to communicate? Where are we coming from? Is there a common ground? So yeah.
Yeah. I think too, there's something about thinking about the idea of a full moon really triggering shadow. There's often something about focus. Where are we focused, or where have we lost focus? Can be really key with Gemini. So I liked your analogy about the puzzle. For me, I always think about the impressionist when I'm thinking about the polarity. and how we integrate that polarity of Gemini and Sagittarius. I think about the Impressionist, I think it was Manet who did the dots. You know the one I mean? That it's like they're all little tiny dots that create the image. And so you need that Gemini energy of looking at the details, of creating the color of the paint, of the technical skill of all these little pieces. And then you have the Sagittarius that's concerned with the big picture that we're trying to convey. But the dots by themselves convey nothing. And you cannot have the big picture without the ability to have developed the skill to create those dots. So it's like there's this interplay between these two
Mm.
signs. And I think sometimes when we talk about polarity, it sounds like we're supposed to be one or the other. And I think that can be what happens with shadow is I'm really comfortable with my Gemini. I'm not so comfortable with the Sagittarius. I'm really comfortable with Sagittarius, but I'm not so comfortable with Gemini. And so we strive to go to one extreme or the other, as opposed to it is
Mm.
about integration. It is about being both, not either or, and bringing them together, and how I can develop both of these and allow them to, like that infinity symbol, the eight on its side going back and forth. Yeah, so I find that energy comes up so strong during full moons, and often because of the shadow, there can also be a lot of projection, right? So if this isn't happening within you with side A and side B going back and forth, it could be I'm representing side A and a person in my life is representing side B and we're going back and forth.
Mm.
And so here, the use of language, communicating what I'm hearing you say, what I'm trying to say, and vice versa can be super important.
mean, I'm so glad you brought up that picture from the paintings and those dots, and then you pull back. It reminded me actually of this beautiful picture that our friends have on their wall. It's their wedding picture, and it's this beautiful portrait of both of them on their wedding day. I mean, so lovely. But actually, when you go closer to that picture, you realize that that wedding picture is actually made up of tiny little pictures of them. So obviously their faces, because there is a color, they are picked from the pictures that are, similar color. And then the dress, the color of the dress again is, lighter or darker. And that shading, like when you're standing back, you just see their faces and obviously their clothing, and when you come back you see the individual pictures of them, and of their family and so on. And oh my god, this is such a Gemini Sagittarius picture now that we're talking about it, how the big picture sometimes, again, sometimes it works different way, like you say. I think I'm more comfortable with that. It's where we have those placements. I'm much more comfortable with Sagittarius than potentially I am with Gemini. So you see that big picture where you need to go, but sometimes you don't know that actually takes a village to get there. It takes the network, it takes your connection, it takes your tribes that you're creating, through the Gemini skills and techniques and, and their beauty, right? So that wedding picture, I mean, thank you, Kimberly, for reminding me, because that is such an awesome metaphor for this. And
That
I
really
just
is.
want to make a disclaimer.
That's an amazing
Yeah.
analogy. I love it.
And I need to find actually that, that picture, and I'll share it with you. But just a disclaimer as well, being very Gemini episode today. um, when we say we're feeling uncomfortable with Gemini or with Sagittarius, we're not talking we're feeling uncomfortable with Gemini people or with Sagittarian people. This is the energy again, and we're relating to archetype and the energy of Gemini. So I have no problem with Gemini people, but the energy, because of where the Gemini is in the house, or which house Gemini occupies in my chart, it's difficult to tap into that for me
Right.
personally. So I think, again, when you're looking at your own chart, and I'm going here with tips, I'll repeat them at the end, but I'm going here, I think, with tips too early. When you're looking at the chart, you might also look for those houses that are a bit more hidden, they're a bit more difficult, they're a bit more trickier to tap into, like the 8th house or like the 12th house. Whatever archetype you have in that house, that might be an archetype that you're a bit struggling with a little bit, or
Hmm.
it's not the energy or the sense of that, of that archetype is not as accessible to you as something else. Again,
Right.
It's not, again, going back to the twins, it's not good or bad. It's just something comes naturally to you and something doesn't, you know?
Yeah. I think you were going to kick us off into looking at some of the aspects with the lunation, but before we do that, let me pull up the chart so those who are following us on YouTube have something to look at, and those who are listening hopefully have their own software so they can pull up a chart of their own. Give me 1 second.
So, what we see in this chart, we've already talked about the full moon being the sun in Sagittarius opposing that moon in Gemini. And that moon squares Saturn in Pisces. So we have a T-square. Also on top of that sun, we have Mars in Sagittarius, which also is opposing that moon. So we have this interesting two archetype added to that full moon soup. Mars squaring the Saturn, and they both obviously Saturn squaring the whole lunation, and the Mars sitting on top of the sun. Again, for me, this is the speaking. The Saturn and Mars energy speaks again to that. Where do I need to pause and where do I need to go? Like, what are the maybe informations that I need to share? What are the information that I need to withhold? We have the Martian energy, which wants to share. It's fiery. It's in Sagittarius. It's go, go, go. And then we have Saturn in Pisces, which just says, well, hold on a second. Let's put a structure to reflect on that, to use our water, to use our intuition, to use the mastering of our emotion, mastering of our unconscious, mastering of our internal world, and see if actually that's worth communicating. Saturn is there creating that tension for that Gemini moon, and creating that tension for a reason. It's this kind of a teacher who says to you, have you actually thought through what you want to say? I remember back in a day when I was at school, this idea when the teachers used to say to you, think before you speak. I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes you just have to say what's out there and just get it out. But this idea, like, have I reflected on what I want to say? If it's important to say, going back to, this moon kind of speaking to us and sharing and communicating our values, have I reflected on how will that affect the collective? Again, going back to, if we are in a position of power, if we are in a privileged position when I have an audience, whether it's 50 people listening to you, 500, 5,000, or 500,000, right? You have an audience that you share the message or information with. Very Gemini, I'm sharing information with. Is that information, helpful? Is that information going to create a ripple effect with that community? Saturn and Pisces, it's your community. It's that collective that you have around you. What are the ripples? Are you responsible for that? Saturn brings the responsibility and accountability for it. This idea, oops, I'm only joking. It's not going to fly with Saturn. Saturn is basically saying, no, 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 you're responsible for what you're communicating and how you're communicating. And yes, we all can make mistakes. That's not the point. We learn from them. But you need to with Saturn, you need to take accountability for what you've done wrong and then do better next time. So not the excuse, oh, sorry, I didn't know. That's an excuse. There is, and I always say there is a difference between explanation and excuse. Actually, I'm really, really genuinely sorry. I wasn't aware this was a problem, or this was a trigger, or this was something. I'll promise I'll look into it. I'll do better next time. I'll improve next time. I'll use, different language, different information, different something. That it's genuine growth, right? Hey, I haven't had a clue that this was the case, but thank you for pointing out my mistakes. Thank you for giving me that feedback. I'll look into it. I'll improve next time. That's the Saturn asking you to, again, communicate with intention, communicate with bringing the mastery to your communication, bringing that teacher quality. If I need to communicate, is it worth spreading, or is it just for fun, for gossip,
Mhm.
for being mean to someone?
Yeah, yeah. When I saw this T-square, what of the moon, the sun, Mars, and then Saturn in the middle, what hit me, because Saturn and Mars, right, in traditional terms, are the ancient malefics. They tend to catch us up, make us maybe have obstacles or see things that we need to learn that can I don't see them as bad, but I do see them as bringing things that can be hard. And now they're in a square to each other. So we're increasing the tension or the perception, to use a very Sagittarian word, the perception of hardship that could be happening here. And what occurred to me was the quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Because Saturn is, I agree with everything that you said, and I'm going to add to that just a touch of emphasis that Saturn's in Pisces. And Saturn in Pisces is very unlike Saturn in any of the other signs. There's a need to be aware of what one's vision is for ourself, for our life, for the world, the big picture things, the things that can take a lifetime to make happen. What is my vision for myself, for my life, for the world at this point in time? So if we're going to be the change we want to see in the world, we have to know what the change is we want to see first. And then Mars, we have to know how to be that change. How do I embody it? How do I take small steps moving towards that? How do I make those small steps bigger steps? And so there can be a whole lot of I'm ready to run forward, I have to stop, the gas pedal and the brake pedal. And how do I negotiate that when it's these two? And then they're immutable signs. They're immutable signs that tend to want to adapt, that want to change. So instead of sticking with what feels like, what we can perceive as hardship, instead of sticking with it, we can be thinking about how do I need to change it. Maybe somebody is thinking about is in the process of publishing, very Sagittarian. Maybe somebody's working on a blog or a website, very Gemini. That and I'm just speaking this because you and I both have talked about our own past trials and tribulations in this kind of thing. Those are things that are really trying, and at times it's like you're ready to throw down the towel and just say, "Okay, I'm doing it wrong. Let me hire an expert who can do it." And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but do I need to hire an expert, or do I need to stay the course? I think can be the question here. And there's a difference between how I feel with the moon, right? And what I think about those feelings, or how those feelings may be impacting or impeding my thinking. There's a difference between that and my vision. Being aware of a vision of what I want to build and what I want to create and where I want to have impact, that is a very emotional thing, but it comes from, I don't know, the level of our soul. It comes from something bigger than I feel overwhelmed today. I feel exhausted today. I feel like I just don't have the energy or the skill or the stamina or the strength or the knowledge to make it happen today. So it's almost like there's this I want to be the change and I want to see change in the world, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm not sure how to do it. And I kind of see that cycle spinning. So I just want to put out there that if it isn't possible on the days preceding and following this full moon, if it doesn't feel possible to be that change, okay, let's break it down. Let's take a Gemini approach of breaking it down. Let's just think about what are the changes I want to see and which one do I want to focus on first. Let's think about what are the steps I can take to move me towards that change. And eventually, in time, we'll figure out, I think, how to weave that together. If all we're focusing on is the hardship, Saturn, if all we're focusing on is the I feel overwhelmed, kind of the negative side of Saturn in Pisces, then we may lose touch with that vision and not be moving forward and not be embracing this.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me go on that soapbox. I appreciate it.
It is. Saturn in Pisces is such a weird creature.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. There's so much to learn from that. Um, but at first glance, it just feels unnatural. And then you
Mm-hmm.
go deeper. It's like, no, there's actually that lesson to learn. There's that mastery of our world, our internal world, our spiritual world. And yeah,
Yeah,
squaring this full moon, it's interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah.
And then do you want me to jump into talking about Mercury? All right. So you gave us
Please.
the
Yeah.
soup. I'm going to stir the cauldron. So the ruling planet of Gemini, or the dispositor, if you will, of the moon in Gemini, is going to be Mercury. And here we see Mercury is hanging out at 24 degrees of Sagittarius. So we were talking about those early degrees of Sagittarius with the sun and the moon. Now we're looking at the latter, the last decan. So when Mercury is in Sagittarius, there can be a yen to use language in a way that is broadening our mind, our perspective, where we're headed. And that's lovely. However, it's not there by itself. It's making we also have another T square in a manner of speaking. It's making a square to Neptune at 24 of Pisces. So again, we're looking at mutable signs. And if we were to plug in Black Moon Lilith, who I work with a lot, she's hanging out over across the pond there at 23 of Virgo. So 23 of Virgo, 24 Pisces, 24 Sagittarius. We have a lovely T square. And I think what I'm sensing the most with this, there are a lot of things, a lot of ways to unpack it, but what I sense the most is Mercury can sometimes trip us up with either or thinking. Either I'm here or I'm there. So either I'm struggling in finding my words because the Neptune in Pisces world, the emotions, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what the change is. I don't know how to be it. That can be swirling, and we can feel at a loss for our words, and we can feel like emotions are holding us back from moving forward. The thoroughbred wants to get out of the gate and nobody's hit the release button. We can't get running. Or I'm on the other side and I'm in tension with that Black Moon Lilith where I can't take this anymore. I am angry. I am upset. The horrors that I see in the world around me, big global picture of Sagittarius, I put on the world news and I'm just horrified at what's happening in every country and all these places and all these wars and all this. I want to go protest. I want to speak out, but then we can flip back to, but I don't know how, right? I'm feeling victimized or I'm feeling confused, can be emotions that come up with squares to Neptune often. And what it's hitting is my thinking. So I'm not having clear thought. I'm having a hard time finding my words. I'm feeling like I'm being choked or held back or pulled back in some way rather than moving forward out in the world the way I want to. I'm not taking that vision and manifesting and using it and going out there. That's sort of the spiral I see. And it's almost like, jumping, like when we were kids and we would play hot potato, pass the potato around and whoever has it at the end, they're out. It's sort of that I'm in a challenge with Mercury Neptune. I'm in a challenge with Mercury Black Moon Lilith. I'm in a challenge Black Moon Lilith opposing Neptune. I'm really angry, but I don't know how to do something, how to have impact, how to have agency about it. And so this kind of jumping around. And I think for me, what is key is the center of this tension is Mercury. So what do I need to do to feel that my mind is centered? And it shouldn't say feel because it's Mercury, it's thinking. What do I need to do so that I am thinking balanced? I am thinking centered. What do I need to do so that my thought pattern is moving me forward, that I am filled with hope and optimism, that I am taking the necessary steps to move towards the future that I want to see? I'm moving towards the change that I want to see. So I think here a lot of this hinges on what's going on with our inner self talk and the people who are talking to us. And going back to that Sabian symbol, are we hearing all of the call from the publications in our life for that radical change? And are we in an echo chamber where I'm only hearing the same voices and the same sources? Or am I broadening my perspective? Am I searching for information from a variety of people, a variety of sources? Am I using information, language to broaden my perspective so that I can feel hopeful that I will either find a way or I am doing the work of moving towards where I want to be, even if I'm not there right now? So I don't that just of course, whenever I see Mercury, I tend to zero in and focus on it, but that really spoke volumes to me when I saw that in this chart.
I mean, I agree. I mean, Mercury, like you say, rules that moon in Gemini, and it is a very tight square to Neptune. Um, so I agree with you. I am going to kind of go from a little bit different angle. So
Mm,
again, for me, the Mercury and Neptune, you kind of touched on that before, um, is communicating something that you might not see clearly yet. So Neptune, the
mm,
fog, Neptune in Pisces can represent, something that is foggy. It's the illusion, delusional, it's the misinformation, disinformation. And then, fiery Mercury, is out there in Sagittarius and wants to deliver that. And it doesn't have time to stop and think. It's like, is the message or the information that I have actually true and clear, and there is a clarity of my source? Or, is there something else? I mean, there's so much going on around in media at the moment. And there were a few things that kind of came up on my feed as well, where people were saying that there are, stories or especially pictures being shared generated by AI. So they're not actually true pictures of the events that happening, is AI generated. So again, we're having that, Neptunian kind of mist, and like, it's the magician. Look at my right hand when I'm doing something with my left.
yeah.
And going back again, like you said, to that Sabian symbol, it's the Radical magazine asking for action, displaying sensational page. Again, just with that Mercury Neptune connection at the moment and that tension, we have the magazines, we have news, we have, all those people out there asking us for action, or, creating that. Is that information that we're getting true and actually from a reliable source? So when I see anytime I see Mercury Neptune connection, I mean, this is beautiful connection for creatives. This is beautiful
Yeah.
connection for, for artists and writers. You're writing science fiction. I mean, Mercury and Neptune's like, come on, I can imagine all those worlds, and I can put them in words, right?
Yeah.
But this is not a signature for clarity and concise, truthful news that you want to deliver. This is a clarity of a storyteller. This is a storytelling combination, not necessarily this is the information, this is your bullet points. The interesting bit about that as well for me, Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius. And for me, sign of Sagittarius, again, I use that word for a reason, is the sign of foreign things, foreign thinking, foreign countries, foreigners. It's something that is different and, to you. Again, I am ultimately a foreigner in a different country. I am, from Poland and I live in UK. I came from a different culture, different upbringing, different language, different structure, different religion. And I live in a country that is different to everything that I knew and I grew up with. It was foreign to me as much as I was foreign to this world around me. Um, and, again, I love Sagittarius for that. And there is a strong signature in my own chart because I am fascinated by everything that I don't know. Like, I am just naturally curious and I love that. But the Mercury in Sagittarius, again, can bring the news about foreign things. So things that you're not familiar with in very sensational way. So again, go back to the source. Ask the source, ask the people or or the news on the ground that's serving that information. Is that actually true? Like, if you want to learn something about Poland, you can probably ask me. I might be a good source to tell you, right, about my culture and my upbringing and my country. If you're asking, someone who lives miles away and learn about my country from the book or from the AI generated image, that message might be again Neptunian, distorted. It might be sensationalized.
Mm-hmm.
You might pick up, again, I'm not saying that it's, someone, I don't know, in Chicago might not be, might not know, but you go to the source. Try to find the source of truth. Try to find the information about things that you're not familiar with. Foreign, for me, the way I understand, when we're talking about semantic of the words, foreign just things different to what I know. So I go to the source. If I want to get to know the subject, whatever the subject is, I want to go to the source of the truth, to something, an expert that knows something really, really well. I mean, random thing. If I want to know something about crocodiles who are not native to my land, right? I'm not going to be asking my neighbors, what to do when you meet the crocodile, or, where do they live and so on. But I bet that people of Florida will tell me, quite a lot of how to deal with them, because they have to deal with them on a daily basis. If I go even further to, an expert in crocodiles, in alligators, they will tell me their truth. If I go to, I don't know, people who hunt them in the bayou of Florida, they'll tell me the truth as well. But they'll not tell me their experience, their actual experience. And then I can learn from that. Again, communicating, connecting. I can connect. I wanted to learn about it. I connected with people who have that direct experience. I'm learning from them. My neighbor in Poland probably couldn't tell me much unless they go to Florida, on holidays or somewhere
Uh-huh.
where the,
Right.
alligators are, right?
Right.
Crocodiles, alligators. But that's the idea. Whatever subject is, think about who shares the information. Think about if that's Neptunian. If you suddenly have an expert in your neighbor, in your work colleague on, I don't know, world politics, something that have, like, where did you get that information? Is that information's coming from a reliable source? If that information's coming from a truthful source? Or are you sensationalizing, going back to that Sabian symbol, are you sensationalizing the information that you heard as part of a gossip, part of the headline, from really unreliable source that just count your clicks? They're not
Yeah.
interested in information and connecting with you and connecting with their law. They're interested in business and in creating your clicks. So again, I'm just looking at some of the stuff for that Sabian symbol. It's listening might be important, challenging outlooks. Again, if someone outlook is different to you, it's foreign to your way of thinking, to your way of feeling, but especially thinking with that Mercury. This concept is foreign to me. We use that in language. I don't understand. This is completely foreign concept. Algebra. Foreign concept, right? Explain to me. Go to the source. Find the teacher.
Yeah.
Be responsible. Again, going back to that Saturn in Pisces. Find the teacher. Find an expert. Find the master in that field. Otherwise, you might get trapped into that Neptunian illusion. This magician that will take a rabbit out of the hat. And then you'll go sensationalizing, oh my God, you can now get the rabbits, for £5.50 from a hat. How amazing is that deal in Tesco?
Yeah.
It's not, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's when I'm thinking about, Mercury and Neptune, are we communicating clearly? And with the feeling, right? We're communicating. Neptune in Pisces can also be that communicating the pain that I feel on what's going on with the world. I literally just want to communicate that because I feel that deeply. I'm connected with my human family and I feel the pain of everything that's going on in the world. And I want to communicate that. Or it might be that I am so surrounded by fog and misinformation and disillusionment as well, that's what I'm connecting and creating even more misinformation in the world. And that's where Saturn will kick in with that, Saturn square to that full moon. Saturn will kick in. If you're adding to that misinformation, you will be held accountable for that. You will be held responsible for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of soapbox going on. There's a lot of chatter. It's such a Gemini episode as well. One thing that honestly, I keep saying that every now and then, but every time we talk about the specific archetype, it just you can see it coming through.
You can. It affects the way we move. It affects our language. It affects what's going on with our technology. It's so funny. All right, so
It is.
there's more
Oh,
we could
sorry.
unpack. Yeah, what?
One more thing that I wanted to mention as well.
Yes.
Everything that we just said about that Mercury and Neptune, bear in mind what Kimberly said earlier as well. Mars is now going through the path that is the pre-shadow, which means, Mercury is going. Yes, thank you. Did I say Mars? Oh my God, it's such a Gemini episode, right? So Mercury will go retrograde in December. But Mercury is entering that pre-shadow, which means Mercury is already going through a path that he will return later. So he will go back through this territory later, which means everything that you're communicating now, everything that you're reading, everything that you're seeing in the news, everything that you're then following up or forwarding or sharing, will come back. You'll have to revisit that again. And that's, I think for me, that's the Saturnian, teaching responsibility for this new full moon comes in, because we will have to revisit that as Mercury will go retro. And I think that that signature of Saturn squaring that full moon will go, okay, you share that information, you made that mess, you created that misinformation, you added to that, how do you then unpack that? How do you then take that responsibility? How you then learn through that? Again, just shows my bias, right? Saturn has a really bad rap about that teacher that kind of punishes you. But I don't think it's about punishment. It's about, we absolutely hate as human taking accountability and responsibility. It's so much nicer when someone else does it. My boss is difficult. My mom didn't let me go to that party, like my teacher, at uni gave me a D or E or something, right? Not A that I deserved. It's just always someone else's accountability or responsibility. And again, I know I'm kind of brushing with the big brush. It's not about the individual situations, but it's actually with Saturn, when you take responsibility, you grow, you master that field. This idea, the way I think about Saturn, I think it was Edison who said, someone asked him, it's like, oh, you failed to discover the light bulb like 99 times. And it was like, no, I discovered how not to do a light bulb 99 times. I didn't fail 99 times before I succeeded. I've learned. Every time you fail, you learn and you adapt and you change. And this is Saturn for me. If you fail and you think I failed, you did. What do you think, what do you believe, it's true. If you think you failed, you failed. That's it, period, done. If you think, you know what, I've tried this way, didn't work out, let me try from another angle. Maybe it didn't work out. Okay, I know now 2 angles that doesn't work. Let me try a third angle. That's the mindset of growth. That's the mindset of Saturn. That's the mindset of mastering something. If you're asking an expert or a master how they get to that level in their field, I guarantee that it wasn't a straight line. That, oh yeah, they have never made a mistake. I've never, tripped. I've never, made an error. I don't know a master or an expert, who would say that. They've made tons of mistakes, but they've learned from every single one. And this is, sorry, again, a soapbox. I just adore Saturn.
No, you don't
Crazy person
say.
here.
I actually enjoy it because I learned Saturn has historically not been one of my favorite placements in my chart. We have a good working relationship now, but I can't say it's comfortable. but it's friendly. I will say that. But I've learned that because of other people who do have a really strong, well-placed Saturn. So I've learned how to work with Saturn. And I have friends who've told me they really appreciate Mercury more now because of
Mhm,
knowing how I work with it. So we all have that area of ease and area of dis-ease within our charts. And
mhm.
I think sharing what works for us or how we view things can really help everybody to become more comfortable with all parts of themselves. So thanks. But I do think we should, for the sake of time, move into probably our tips and tricks and
Yeah,
bring this one to a wrap. Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
go for it.
Okay. I'm just going to focus on that, going back to it is a full moon. It is a full moon with the moon in Gemini, the sun in Sagittarius, and that sun is conjunct Mars. And we didn't mention it earlier, but the asteroid Ceres is right by Mars. So there's this nurturing energy, passion, fire. I need to get out there. I would say that for what I'm going to be doing on this particular lunation, I'm planning. I'm planning a cafecita. I'm planning a let's meet up for coffee, a couple of close friends who I can talk to with ease, who will share ideas, who share my passion, maybe share some of my anger about some of the things in life in the world where I feel angry, and also with whom I can listen to their passion and I can share mine. So my tip is get out there in the world, talk to some people, talk to the people who motivate you, who excite you, who allow you to express verbally, because I think through that conversation, we may stumble unintentionally upon thoughts that pop, light bulbs that go off, ideas that can motivate us about how we do want to move forward. Um, I kind of feel like this is a verbal vision board. When we have a lot of things in water, we'll say, get pictures, make a vision board. That's what I feel like with this. It's that it's to get out there, to get outside of our head, to get outside of ourselves and express our thoughts and listen and see where that dialogue and conversation goes. So that one, we're not pent up, we're not filled with pent up emotions. Because we know if we try to pen in Mars, it often turns into anger and resentment. So let's get that out, let's get it expressed. But also, let's see where those words take us and those conversations lead us. And when we join forces with others, often insights happen and illuminate. So we may stumble upon the way in which we want to be the change we see in the world.
That's lovely. That's a lot of conversation for a coffee with a friend.
Well, our coffee catch ups with some of my friends here. We're known to go like a good 3 to 4 hours. So yeah.
And it can be healing, isn't it? Like
Hmm.
literally just coffee with a friend can be so healing. So I think my tip is going back to the that Gemini twin, the earthy and spiritual. And at the full moon, and again when we're talking about the conversation, have a look, what is it that it's easy for you to absorb and communicate, and what is it that it's difficult? Are you the earthly twin and have difficulties with your spiritual side? Are you the spiritual twin but have difficulties with your earthly side? Which part of you is not reflected, which part of you is not communicating? And maybe even having that little playful full moon when you're inviting your twin, the one that doesn't quite sit, and inviting him or her for coffee, for chat, and say, what do you want to tell me? What is it? And journal on that. What is it that you want to tell me? I'm not comfortable with you. Again, you're foreign to me. I'm light, you're dark. Or I am the earth and the seas and the trees, and you're the air and the sky, and I don't understand you because you're a foreign concept to me. And invite that twin and say, what do you want to teach me? What is it? We're twins. We're two sides of the same coin. So what is it that I can learn from you and integrate within me? Not quite the shadow work, although shadow work is so good for the full moon, but having that conversation with your alter ego and see what comes up.
Beautiful. I love it. I think I'm going to do both of those things. So I look forward to hearing more when I get to see you again in 2 weeks, and hopefully Anne will join us. And in the meantime, I encourage everyone out there to join our chat, post your thoughts, your experiences in the comments below. As always, we will respond in kind. And thanks for taking some time out to join us for this week's Astro Chat. Don't forget, if you didn't already, hit subscribe, like, and that bell so you'll know when we're back in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.